Dust lifted in pale ribbons as the evening train groaned in a dry creek station, its whistle echoing against the red hills like a lament. The town gathered not for travel, but for spectacle, their eyes sharpened by hunger for gossip. Two young women stepped down with a boy trailing between them, his small hand gripping the worn hem of one sister's dress. The wind pressed grit against their cheeks, and in that harsh light, every flaw, every hesitation became another thread for the townsfolk to tug. "They've come for back east," someone muttered, voice pitched high with satisfaction. The Harrow girls. The one in blue turned down Boone right to his face. Laughter rippled. Children pointed. Eliza Harrow, 21, held her chin high though her throat tightened against every whisper. Beside her, Clara, younger by 2 years, moved with softer steps, her eyes lowered. And Tommy, only 10, tried to shrink behind them, though his stomach growled loud enough for him to hear. Eliza had expected shame to sting, but she had not expected it to echo, repeated in every mouth until it was no longer her voice but theirs. Months ago, she had written hopeful letters, promising her hand in marriage to Jedediah Boone, a man with land enough to feed them all. But when she arrived, she had seen him, large-bodied, slow-moving, sweat shining on his brow, and fear clamped her heart. In that moment, she refused him. The refusal spread like wildfire, and the West was merciless to a woman who broke her word. Boone, red-faced and breathing hard, had taken Clara instead. The younger girl, trembling but determined, stepped forward, sealing her fate with a quiet yes. Some called it loyalty, others foolishness. Eliza, cast adrift, became the subject of every wagging tongue. By the week's end, she and Tommy were housed in a leaning shack on the edge of town, walls breathing wind, cupboards bare but for a crust of bread. Eliza tried to shield the boy from it all, but Dry Creek was not kind to orphans. Their mother had wasted away with sickness, their father crushed under a fallen timber, and now the children were left to Eliza's thin shoulders. She worked where she could, laundry, mending, but whispers followed her hands, curdling every chance. One morning, Tommy returned from school with dirt smeared across his face, his small fists clenched. "They said I was a beggar boy," he whispered. "Said my sister's too proud to feed me right." His eyes brimmed, but he swallowed the tears. Eliza knelt, pressing his cheek to her shoulder. "You are not a beggar," she told him, though her own stomach had been empty since yesterday. Shame, she thought, was a hunger deeper than any bellies. It was then that Caleb Rollins first noticed them. The cowboy was a man cut from silence, his body lean from long years on horseback, his eyes shadowed by a brim that had seen better days. He had buried his own kin long ago and learned that words often did more harm than good. He passed through town when the cattle needed moving, his boots worn, his hat low, his heart tucked away where no one could reach it. That day, as he rode past the fence line, he saw the Harrow children huddled near the post, gnawing at bread so hard it scraped their gums. He heard the gossiping women behind him, sharp as spurs. That's what happens to girls who turn down a man. Pride'll starve you faster than drought. Caleb slowed. His horse shifted, impatient. He could have ridden on. Most men would, but something in the hollow of the boy's cheeks, in the proud tilt of the older sister's chin, rooted him. The next morning, before the sun reached over the hills, a small bundle lay on the Harrow's stoop. Bread, jerky, a tin of beans. No note, no name. Eliza stared at it, as if it were a miracle she did not deserve. She looked up, half expecting to see laughter waiting in the shadows, but found only silence. She hesitated, pride pulling one way, hunger the other. Then Tommy tugged at her sleeve, his wide eyes pleading. She gave in. The next day, another bundle, and the next. Eliza began to watch for the cowboy, though she never caught him leaving anything. She noticed him from afar instead, the way he rode slow through town, tipping his hat but speaking little, the way his hands looked carved from wood and leather, every line etched with labor. He never lingered, but she felt his presence all the same, like the shadow of a tall tree against her door. She tried once to thank him, stepping onto the street when she spotted him outside the mercantile. Her words tangled in her mouth. He nodded only, a brief lowering of the hat brim, before striding away. It's something in his eyes, dark and steady, told her thanks was not what he sought. Tommy, however, grew bold. The cowboy with sad eyes, he whispered one evening, curled under the blanket they shared. "He's looking out for us." Eliza hushed him, though her lips curved despite themselves. But kindness never went unnoticed in Dry Creek, and soon the whisper shifted. "She's clinging to another man now, a drifter no better than herself." Martha Tate, the widow with a tongue sharper than a blade, fueled the fire. "Mark my words, shame breeds shame." Eliza pulled her shawl tighter each time she stepped into town. The words struck deep, yet behind them flickered something she had not felt since her parents lived. Hope. Thin and trembling, yes, but alive. One evening, as the sun bled crimson across the horizon, she saw him again. Caleb Rollins stood at the edge of the street, hat in hand, his gaze lingering on her longer than before. For a moment, she thought he might speak. Instead, he turned, walking into the fading light. Still, when she closed her eyes that night, she saw his shadow stretched across her doorway, as if he had never truly left. And in the hush between heartbeats, Eliza realized the gossip no longer mattered as it once had. What frightened her more was the stirring inside her own chest, the dangerous thought that perhaps, just perhaps, she was not as alone as the town wanted her to believe. The wind carried a cruel chill the night Tommy staggered through the door, his cheeks pale, his breath shallow. Eliza rushed to him, gathering his small frame against her chest. His lips trembled as he whispered, "They wouldn't let me eat. Said beggars don't get a share." His belly rumbled with emptiness, but it was his trembling hands that broke her most. She pressed her face to his hair, choking back tears she could not afford to shed. When Caleb Rollins appeared in the doorway, the lantern light catching the worn lines of his face, she did not question how he knew. He stood there, hat in hand, as if pulled by something stronger than choice. "Boy needs food," he said simply. His voice was low, gruff, yet steady. He set a sack upon the table, the weight of it thudding like a promise. Beans, flour, salt pork, more than she could have hoped for. Eliza's pride pricked her tongue, but gratitude softened it. "You've done more than enough." Caleb's gaze lingered on the boy curled against her, then shifted back to her face. "Not near enough." He sat at the table as though it were the most natural thing, tearing bread into smaller pieces and coaxing Tommy to eat. The boy obeyed, his wide eyes fixed on the cowboy, as though he were some figure from an old story, someone who rode in when all seemed lost. Word spread fast by morning. Martha Tate had seen Caleb leave the Harrow shack and wasted no time sowing the scene into scandal. The fallen girls found herself a savior, she hissed across the pews of the church. "No doubt she'll ruin him as she's ruined herself." The words darted from lip to lip, pricking ears until even Jedediah Boone caught wind. Boone, now husband to Clara, turned the rumor over in his head. Though his heart was not unkind, pride weighed heavy. Clara defended her sister, her eyes wet with shame at the cruelty spoken. "She has no one else," she pleaded. But Boone's jaw tightened, and his silence was its own condemnation. Eliza, hearing the whispers coil tighter, packed what little they owned. Her hands shook as she folded Tommy's shirt, her mind convinced that leaving town was the only way to silence the fire. "We can't stay," she told him, her voice low. "The town's decided what we are." That night, Caleb found her outside, clutching a bundle of clothes, her face pale in the moonlight. "You run, you'll never stop," he said. She looked up, startled at his sudden presence. He leaned against the fence post, the wood groaning under his weight, and for the first time, words spilled from him more than sparingly. "I lost a sister once. Fever took her. She was about the boy's age. I couldn't stop it. Couldn't save her." His voice faltered only slightly before hardening again. "I won't stand by and watch another go without a fight." Eliza's throat tightened. In his confession, she heard not pity, but kinship. A man who had carried his own shame, his own helplessness, and had chosen silence until now. She lowered her bundle to the ground, her heart split between fear and a fragile new trust. The turning came on a Sunday. The church bell tolled across the valley, drawing townsfolk in their best clothes. Eliza walked with Tommy beside her, determined not to hide. Yet the whispers swelled louder this time, emboldened by numbers. A boy sneered and called Tommy beggar. Laughter broke out, sharp as glass. Eliza's knees weakened, her breath caught. She felt the ground sway, shame pressing down so heavily she feared she would sink beneath it. Then silence fell, sudden and absolute. Caleb Rollins stepped forward from the edge of the crowd, his boots grinding against the dust. He said nothing at first, letting the quiet stretch until every eye turned. His gaze swept over the faces, pausing just long enough to draw discomfort. Finally, he spoke. If feeding a hungry child is shame, his voice carried, calm yet resonant, then I'll carry it gladly. If kindness is a burden, then I reckon I'm stronger than a lot of you. He bent, lifting Tommy with an ease that made the boy gasp in surprise, and set him high upon his horse tethered nearby. Turning, he extended his hand toward Eliza. She hesitated, heart hammering, aware of every eye fixed upon her. As she placed her hand in his, trembling but resolute. No one laughed. Not a word was uttered. Even Boone lowered his hat, and Clara pressed her fingers to her lips, tears slipping free. Martha Tate shrank into the crowd, her sharp tongue suddenly useless. Caleb mounted, settling Tommy before him, and Eliza climbed behind. The horse shifted beneath their weight, but Caleb's steady hand calmed it. He did not look back as he guided them away from the stunned assembly, only forward, toward the horizon where dust met light. The ride was quiet but heavy with meaning. Eliza clutched Tommy close, her other hand resting against Caleb's back. She expected to feel like a burden, but instead she felt the strength of a man who had chosen to stand, and in that choice, lifted her as well. At his cabin, modest and weather-beaten, Caleb helped them down. He did not speak of marriage, nor of duty, only of shelter. Roof leaks some, he admitted, but it keeps the cold out. You'll be safe here. Eliza nodded, her voice lost, but her heart knew this was more than she had dreamed possible. Tommy smiled, the first true smile in weeks, and whispered, "We have a home again." The fire crackled as dusk deepened, shadows lengthening across the wooden floor. Caleb sat in his chair, quiet as always, yet something in his posture had changed. The silence was no longer emptiness. It was companionship, an unspoken vow. Eliza, seated near the hearth, watched him from the corner of her eye, her chest rising with the first breath of peace since stepping from the train. Still, outside, the town simmered with unfinished judgment. Whispers never died easily in Dry Creek, and as night cloaked the hills, Eliza knew their story was only beginning, that the world would test them again, perhaps harsher than before. But now there was a flicker of strength, not just her own, and in that fragile flame, she placed her faith. The boy's laughter rose once before sleep claimed him, light as the crackle of the fire. Eliza lifted her gaze to Caleb, who met her eyes with a steady look, unreadable yet full of promise. For the first time, she did not feel mocked nor cast aside. She felt seen, and in the hush of that moment, as if the wind itself were holding its breath, Eliza realized that her shame had turned into something else entirely, something the town could never take away.